Hello there. Thank you for joining us again. We're going to have another one of our Bible School Sunday sermons on the Old Testament. And today we're going to look at the Book of Esther. It's such a treat to read Esther. There's many twists and turns in the plot. The book is not very long. I recommend you read it all. But to summarize the story, we first need to have a little bit of background. This is set in the country of Persia. The Jews that are there are marginalized and not treated really well. And they are part of those that had scattered throughout the different countries. This book is probably based a little bit on the historical King Xerxes. But in this story, his name is Ahasuerus, and he has a queen, Vashti. Ahasuerus was proud of his wealth. He was proud of his country, and he loved to celebrate and eat and drink. And so he decided to have this huge festival that would last 180 days. And as part of that, there was a banquet that lasted for 7 days, in which King Ahasuerus entertained the men, and then his wife, Vashti, entertained the women. Toward the end of those 7 days, Ahasuerus evidently had quite a bit to drink over that week, and he decided that he wanted to bring in Queen Vashti to show her off to all the men. Well, Vashti was pretty smart. She knew that that would not be a good thing for her, and she turned the king down and said, "No, I'm not coming." Well, that was quite a big thing back then for the queen to tell the king that she wasn't going to obey. So the king was furious, and so were his advisors. And they all are talking, and they're telling the king, "You have got to do something about this. This will filter down throughout the kingdom, and there will be women all through the land that think they don't have to obey their husbands." And so they got rid of Vashti. They turned her away from being the queen. And as part of that story, they decided they needed a new queen, and they were going to have a big contest to see who the next queen would be. And throughout the land, the word went that they were looking for beautiful young women to come be the next queen. Well, there was a young Jewish girl. Her name was Hadassah. She was the adopted daughter of Mordecai, and they decided that she should try out to be the new queen. Now, they changed her name at that point to Esther, and she went to the palace. Well, she was beautiful, and she was sweet, and she soon won the favor of all those who were working on this pageant that literally ran for months. And she got a lot of favor. She got special beauty treatments. And sure enough, this young Jewish girl, Esther, was chosen to be the new queen. Not long after she became the queen, her adopted father, Mordecai, was near the gates of the city, and he heard about a plot to assassinate the king. So he told Esther about that, and she went to the king and told him that Mordecai had found this out and that he wanted to save his life. So they investigated, and sure enough, it was true. And these men were caught and they were hung. About that time also, the king decided that he needed to promote someone to be second in command. And there was a man that had been loyal to him, and he wanted to give him this position, and that man's name was Haman. He's the villain of the story. So Haman came to be the second in command, and with that came a lot of perks, including that people had to bow down to him just like they did to the king. So Haman really liked that, and he would go out and about, but he noticed that there was one person there near the city gates that never bowed down, and that was Mordecai. Made him so mad, and he tried to get him to do it, but Mordecai would not because he was a devout Jew. So Haman plotted, and he told the king that there were a group of people in the kingdom that were not obeying the rules of the land, that were against the king, and that he thought that they ought to annihilate all of them. And he got so stirred up, and he got the king so stirred up that the king agreed, and he signed a decree that these people should be annihilated. Well, Mordecai, and of course all the Jewish people, hear about this, and they're frightened, and they're scared, and they're worried, and they wonder what are they going to do. And Mordecai decided that he would tell Esther, and Esther could get the king to change his mind. So he told Esther about this, and he said, you're going to have to go to the king. You're going to have to tell him that he needs to save you and your people. But Esther was scared. She said, he doesn't even know I'm Jewish, and I don't know what he would think about that. And plus, I haven't seen the king in a bit. And we can't just go in there and present ourselves to the king. Even the queen has to be invited. Because if I go in there and he's in a bad mood, he could have me killed. If he doesn't reach his scepter out to me, then I'm going to be in bad trouble anyway. But Mordecai explained to her, you're going to be caught eventually anyway. These are your people. You might be safe right now, but these are your people that you've come from. You've got to help all of us. You're going to have to take that chance. And so Esther was scared, but she went before the king. And sure enough, he reached his scepter out to her, and she felt quite a bit of relief. And he said he had missed her, and what did she want? He would give her anything. And she said, well, I just want you to come to a banquet that I'm preparing. And in fact, why don't you ask Haman to come too? So the king gladly accepted, and the banquet was planned. Well, in the meantime, as Haman was gladly hearing about this and thought he was really honored to get to go to this banquet, and he's going home to tell his wife, and as he leaves, there he sees Mordecai again, and once again Mordecai is not bowing down to him. So when he gets home, he's in a kind of a grouchy mood, and his wife says, you just enjoy that banquet, and remember, this decree is out there. Why don't you go ahead and build special galas for that Mordecai fella? And so Haman thought that was a great idea, and so he did. He built those gallows. Well, it was finally time for the banquet, and the king and Haman show up, and it was a great meal, and they had a great time. And finally the king said, now, Esther, what can I do for you? I want to give you something. And so Esther said, I want you to save my life. And the king said, save your life? And she said, yes, Haman has said that all of my people, and that includes me, should be killed here in the kingdom. And the king turns to Haman and he says, well, I didn't know she was part of them. Anyway, it made the king so mad to think that his beautiful queen would be treated like this, and that he had felt like he'd kind of been tricked about it. And he storms out. In the meantime, Haman is realizing he's in bad trouble. So he throws himself on the queen as she's reclined there on the sofa. And when the king comes back in, he sees Haman laying there, and he thinks that he's assaulted the queen. And so this really was the final straw, and he ordered him to be taken out and hung. And they hung him on the gallows that he had built for Mordecai. Well, of course, when the decree was lifted and the Jewish people were safe, they were so thankful. And they were thankful to Mordecai and to Esther, and they were praising God. So they have a festival, and they call it the Feast of Purim. And that feast is still celebrated, and that's the story they tell about how the Feast of Purim got started. Well, this is a special book, and even though the book itself does not mention God, we feel like God is present in that book, that God is guiding Mordecai and Esther. And we wonder what that book might say to us today. Well, the first thing I think it says to us is that sometimes things look really bad. Things look like they couldn't get any worse. And it seems like I hear a lot of people right now very discouraged about a lot of things that's happened in this year of 2020, and they are asking, where is God? Well, I think this book helps us understand that God works in mysterious ways with different people, with different circumstances, and although things may be rough, we can count on God to be walking with us. And then the second thing I think we need to know about this book and what God may be trying to tell us in this book is about what Mordecai told Esther. And that was that she needed to put her own immediate safety aside. She needed to look after her people, that she was part of these people, that she had to reach out and lift these folks up. She had to take a chance. She had to be the advocate for her people. And I think God might be calling on us to do the same thing. I think about the pastor Niemöller out of Germany during the time of Nazis. He came forth and he was talking about how disappointed he was that the church had not stepped up and prevented some of the calamities that had happened during that time. And he had a famous statement, I think you've probably heard it, talking about, they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't do anything about it. They came for the socialists, but I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. They came for the trade unionists, but I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And he said, by the time they came for me, there was no one left to speak for me. And he realized And I think Mordecai and Esther came to realize that anytime anyone is in danger, anytime anyone is marginalized, anytime anyone is mistreated or looked down upon, that's us. That's one of God's children. That's one of our brothers and sisters. I think God is calling on us. When we think about all those who are marginalized, maybe we need to speak up for them. Those who are physically or mentally disadvantaged need an advocate. Jewish people are still often mistreated. So are Muslims. So are blacks. So are those in the Latino communities. So are those who are Native Americans. And so are those who are LGBTQ. And just like Mordecai said and Pastor Niemöller said, it might not be us right now that's been made fun of or looked down upon, but we are all one in God's eyes. We are all God's children, and He calls on us to be our brother's keeper, to look out after each other. We have to speak up. Maybe God has put us in this time, in this place, for a special purpose. I believe God is calling the church to make this world a safe and prosperous place for all people, because we are all God's people. I pray that as you contemplate this story and think about if there's folks in your communities that need a voice, that you could help with that, that you will prayerfully give that consideration. Let us celebrate the mighty God we serve and how He loves us and how He calls on us to love one another. May God bless you this day.